Good evening, everyone. Happy to welcome you all to the American Academy in Rome. I'm Allison Emerson, Interim Mellon Professor of Humanities at the Academy. And tonight we have the second in our series of 2 Getty Global Fellows lectures. The Getty Global Fellowship Program brings art and architecture historians as well as archaeologists to the Academy for 6-month stays over 2 consecutive years. Getty Global Fellows are citizens or residents of North Africa or the Eastern Mediterranean, whose projects are devoted to the broader Mediterranean world, and here in Rome, they become part of our vibrant Academy community. Tonight's speaker is Zakarya Khelif, PhD candidate in the Department of Archaeology at the University of Algiers II. Zakarya is currently completing his PhD thesis, titled The Roman Houses of Tipasa of Mauritania Caesariensis, an archaeological and analytical study. It's a bit of a mouthful, Zakarya. Since 2020, he has been a research associate in the Department of Historical Archaeology at the National Center for Archaeological Research, CNRA, in Tipasa, Algeria. His interests are in Roman archaeology, with a specialization in the domestic architecture of North African elites, excuse me. He has executed field surveys and excavations at Roman sites as an integral part of rescue archaeology and has taken part in a national research project that examines the human occupation of the eastern part of Algeria in antiquity. Welcome, Zakarya.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Marla, for introducing me. And first of all, I would like to thank the American Academy for hosting me for this second session, and also all the fellows and the member of the community that I have met during this experience of 2 years. And also, I would like to thank especially my wife, because it's not easy for her to stay alone for 6 months and 6 months again, you know. Okay. Oh, again, sorry. The subject matter that I would like to explore today is part of my PhD research, titled, as mentioned before, The Houses of the City of Tipasa, an analytical architectural study focusing on the private architectural preferences and design choices embraced by the elite African inhabitants of this historically significant Roman city known as Tipasensis of Mauritania Caesariensis, modern-day Tipasa in Algeria. The nature of the Mediterranean world played a significant role in shaping the architectural preferences and tastes of its people, particularly the elites. North Africa, being a prominent part of this ancient center, especially during the Roman Empire, offers rich examples of domestic architecture that provide deep insights into the cultural identity of its inhabitants, going beyond being just residences where an extended family, including slaves, lived, but served also as significant pillars of the social life of their owners. Part of the owner's social life took place in its large spaces and reception areas, such as the vestibula, triclinia, peristyle, and bathsuits. This has prompted researchers to examine domestic buildings as a source of information about certain aspects of Roman social realities in North Africa. The first attempt was that of the French scholar Yvon Thibault, published in 1987, in which he pointed out the role of Mediterranean and Hellenistic influences on African domestic architecture of the Roman period. The contribution of the volume of the Sagi realized by Ghidini and Bolo to Roman African domus is a significant study as it examines 136 examples from Provinciae Africae Proconcularis, trying to define the characteristic of each region. It carefully analyzes various parts separately before making a reconstruction of the units of the residence. The work of Carucci, published in 2006, is really a fruitful study examining the architectural layout of African houses connected to their decorative elements, mosaics, with the support of literary sources as a method of inquiry about the activities in the Roman house in general and in the African domus in particular. Although the Roman African house may appear uniform at first glance, there are significant variations in specific details from a city to another. To effectively address this issue, it's necessary to go beyond the traditional methods of interpreting field observations that are often limited to detailed architectural investigations of the archaeological remains. My study of the domestic space at Tipaza is primarily a study of architecture, but it's not limited only to this method of investigation, as I'm trying, in fact, to envisage the private lives of its elite. To confront this complex issue, I have decided to include ancient sources as a supplementary element of investigation by using them carefully within the scope of my chosen period of time. I believe they will provide valuable insights into the functioning of the Roman house as perceived and experienced by those who lived during that time. At the front is the architectural treatise of the Latin author Vitruvius on ideal type of the Roman house, which is much practical in discussing the disparities between the Vitruvian model and the forms that emerge from archaeological excavations. Despite it predates the historical framework of my research and the evolution nature of the Roman house over antiquity. Additionally, Apuleius' works, Metamorphoses, Apology, and Florida, are significant as they provide valuable information on the way local people experience their domestic space. Despite being a superstitious tale, the Golden Ass, it likely holds some truth within it. It's conceivable that there is a degree of truth in this novel, considering the impossibility, the impracticality of inventing a history for an era dominated by imagination, where no word, no fact has a basis in reality. Therefore, how do we make sense of this? Considering this inviolable source of information, recent academic research examines Apuleius' work within the framework of familial and social dynamics, as well as cultural interactions between the imperial center and the provincial peripheries. through my study of the elite residencies in Tipasa, a significant city with Numidian, Punic, and Roman legacy, the primary aim is to reveal fundamental principles that extended beyond the region to the entire empire, while also highlighting unique regional characteristics that may be less significant but valuable in understanding the private life of its upper class. So, as you can see, the Roman city of Tipasensis shows significant examples of elite residencies, most of which have an internal axial peristyle. They are the procurator's house, the house of Frescoes, the house with peristyle, the house of Lotis, and the house of the mosaic of Achilles. These houses are so important in terms of their architectural layout, dimensions, their location within the urban grid of the city. They are all located to the northwest of the Forum, along two sides of the main street, the Cardo Maximus. They were built before the Antonine period, out beyond the early city, which was expanded from being municipium to a colony under the Emperor Hadrian, and named Colonia Aelia Augusta Tipasensium. I would like, through this presentation, to explore the central reflections that are of great interest to me in my research. The main subject: to what extent can a house offer insights into the private lifestyle and cultural identity of its inhabitants? Thought-provoking reflections, criteria and methods for identifying space when architecture and material production evidences don't provide much data. How can we identify space? To what extent can ancient literary texts contribute to our investigation? Another also reflections, the arrangement of the inner spaces or rooms within the house, their functionality, and the plan followed for the design of the whole residence. Is this arrangement and connections of the spaces to one another similar to those in Africa? A comparative study could help in identifying their functions. Is it possible to follow their functionality over our chosen time period, which is the Antonine period? Was there a consistent plan followed in their design? Another point, the urban context of the houses and the way they related to the city as a whole. Here, I mean the relation between private and public constructions. Another point, apart from being used for residential purposes, did the houses have any extra elements that aided in the revival of the residential area? The cultural identity of the owners, affected by the dynamic nature of the cursus honorum. Is it possible to uncover this through our investigation? Now let's move into an overview of research conducted on the two samples that I am working on. The name of the house comes from the mural paintings that were uncovered in 1940 by Lwilicki, which includes 9 pieces of artwork, with one particularly remarkable depicting the head of a girl. The French colonial brothers conducted an in-depth investigation of the house of Frescoes from 1951 to 1959, which was later published in 1961 issue of Libica Review. The study was divided into two sections. The first one detailing 35 tombs discovered under the house and listing their funerary objects. The second chapter on the house, and it was on the house and its urban environment, where the researcher identified 22 rooms. Some rooms are associated with specific functions and activities, while others remain identified and defined. Barades outlined 3 stages in the evolution of the house. The first phase, between 150 and 160 AD, involved the construction of the house in the Hellenistic style, featuring a central courtyard and rooms encircling it. In the second phase, which dates back to the Severian period, the house's original plan was Romanized and underwent multiple modifications. From the 4th century to the 6th century and 7th century AD, the house continued to be inhabited, marking the third phase of its development, of its evolution. This is the plan of the first phase and the faction of rooms during the first phase according to Barades. The reception area, Stockholm, whether, I don't know if it's clear. Is it clear, the image? Okay. And as we can see, the architectural plan of this first phase is generally dominated by a courtyard in the center and a room arranged around it. This is the plan of the second phase. And the Romanization and the modifications really here, as you can see, is they included the Roman baths in room G and D, and also another modifications here is that okay, I will explain this in the analysis. This is the house of Riscos, as you can see. Now, I will explain, I will move to the house of Lotis. The name of this house is connected to the head of a statue of a girl discovered in the lower section, because there are 2 sections of this house, decorated with a lotus flower petals representing the nymph Lotis. Barades conducted systematic investigations on this house from 1959 to 1960. However, the outcomes of his research were not released in the following Libica series as he had hoped, leaving us with a dearth of information about this particular house. The single piece of information we have from him is a report that was published in the African Journal in 1961, outlining 14 years of research he carried out on Tipasa from 1948 to 1961. The author mentioned some excavations conducted at that house in parts of the report. Barades outlined 2 sections of the house that were linked by 7-step staircase, each based on a peristyle surrounded by rooms. He was uncertain whether the 2 courtyards were part of one property or if they were part of 2 distinct residences separated by a common wall. In total, he identified 20 rooms. One of them was considered as oecus, 14 shops, and storeroom and bathroom. This is the main elements of the house of Lotus, as you can see. Identifying space. Now I would like to talk about the methodology of my research. The first point that I'm interested in is using ancient sources and dealing carefully with their texts. In his description of the ideal house, Vitruvius points out the theoretical principles and the systematical proportions for building the private houses, the climate in which they are built, symmetry, and modifications in it to suit the site, proportions of principal rooms, the special purposes of different rooms required, the special purposes of different rooms require different exposures, and how the rooms should be suited to the station of the owners. When he discusses the private spaces, he notes that they were served only for the family members and not accessible without invitation, while public spaces could be shared with outsiders. This differentiation between the inner spaces is a key for comprehending how the domestic space was divided based on specific function. Moreover, he points out the importance of social status in shaping their arrangement within the house. Even more significant, he states that the house came into being not in a response of individual needs, but as a consequence of social organization. But in fact, the nature of private space cannot possibly be defined without taking into consideration the urban environment in which that space was situated. And Vitruvius himself insisted that venerable architectural formula must be modified in order to adapt the building to its surroundings. He suggests, for instance, modifying the usual proportion of a room to improve its lighting. As a result, using a Roman magistrate's house for comparison with that of public speaker or advocate in order to highlight specific details, is it a misstep? Even if there is a possibility of relevance in more general context, given that every household owner must ensure that there are specific areas for his essential daily needs, as receiving guests, cooking, bathing, sleeping, and other daily activities. But to what degree can this perspective be considered reliable? Does it extend beyond time and geographical constraints within diverse cultural and social contexts, especially considering that Vitruvius lived in the age of Augustus, marked by adherence to building regulations and his emphasis on Italic traditions, and the fact that African houses are not identified precisely on social standard. Therefore, we must give due regard to the cultural identity of its people in analyzing ancient texts, as it would be inappropriate to contrast a Roman house with Italic tradition against one from North Africa with Punic and Numidian roots. In this particular case, the utility of the treatise of the Architectura is somewhat limited in its usefulness regarding the cultural identity of a certain region. For more detailed analysis, I think turning to the works of Apuleius would provide a more thorough understanding of the local culture and how the domus worked. Another point is comparative architectural study of different samples from North Africa. There is a disagreement among scholars about the identification of the main spaces of the African house, especially in terms of reception areas. When examining the houses of Volubilus, Tovno pointed out the Italic influences on the Volupolitan model and identified the main reception room as tablinum, while Etienne identified as oikos, emphasizing the Hellenistic influences. Rebuffa, on the other hand, held a differing perspective and identified as triclinium, a term commonly associated with the dining room, while also giving the name exedra to the smaller room compared to this. In her detailed investigation, Carucci determined that the main triclinium as the largest room in the Romano-African house, with a secondary one positioned at a right angle to it. Within this clash of opinions, should we move forward with a comparative study? Thus, selecting appropriate examples for comparison and establishing a coherent logic in our analysis is highly valuable to enhance this utility of comparison in my research on specific details, but not to the detriment of the houses I'm working on, and without detracing them from their real historical fact, historical significance. I opted to only include examples that pertain to the historical period of my research, which is the Hittite Empire, especially those dating from the 2nd and the 3rd century. But what can we say about the different geographical area for comparison? In fact, the impact of climate, materials, of building, topography of the site, on the architectural plan of the houses, which is really important, and it's well attested in North African domestic architecture. More broadly, for instance, an example here, the way building functioned depended generally to a large extent on how the surrounding area of the city was laid out and equipped. Water distribution system had considerable impact on daily life. Such things did not exist everywhere, and where the city didn't exist, they rarely dated from the founding of the city. These fast public works greatly affected private comfort. Taking into consideration all these details, I moved to establish the following standards for my architectural investigation. The dimension of the rooms. Generally, a large room with best decoration is designated to receive a guest. Their position within the house, their orientation regarding the sun and air, the way they connect with one another, especially the public spaces of the domus, loca comuna, which are generally easy to identify compared to loca propria, and also their connection with the public structure, I mean here the urban context. Climate and topography of site, building materials and methods, the possibility of managing also the space. Now, I would like to move to the spaces that I could identify in Tipasa. Let's start with the vestibulum and its adjacent rooms. In Italy, the architectural arrangement of the vestibulum and adjacent rooms was essentially linked to the ritual of salutatio. In the morning, low social status clients visited and greeted their patron to obtain food or money, sportuli, needed for their survival that day, as well as to seek advice on matters like property or their daughter's betrothal. The patron obtained in return political support and was repaid by increased social prestige. In order the mourning ritual to be carried out effectively with numerous clients and servants present, a sequence of rooms with various functions was essential alongside the vestibule, where clients awaited their individual summons to meet their patroness. A small room, the cella janitoris, was where the guard servant observed the movements of those entering and leaving. The odious chamber is where the master welcomed his clients for the salutatio and for business discussion, and a room for business discussion, and a room for storing sportuli and official documents. But can it be said that this ritual also influenced the layout of African houses? Have African sources, such as Apuleius' work, made any reference to it? Can we confirm this through archaeological analysis of the remains? And let's steer clear of interpreting the evidence with a bias towards ancient texts. And what a mistake. Vitruvius denotes in his description of the ideal house of vestibula regalia alta as rooms necessary in the rich domus of men holding public office. In the description of an nobleman, Apuleius mentions a house provided with an ample and richly decorated vestibulum. Carucci, in her study, could identify such type of vestibule with its adjacent rooms served for salutatio ritual in the house of Castorius at Quicul. But it's not a coastal city, as we mentioned, to focus on in our comparison. I have just mentioned this to have an idea. For example, the space 1, according to her, is the most standing example of the vestibula regalia alta mentioned by Vitruvius. And the odious chamber is room 4, while the cella for the janitor is the lodge 3. The entrance area was an open court, decorated with a row of 8 columns around. She pointed out that the preserved vestibula of the Romano-African houses shows that the waiting area was often a room of moderate size. Let's move to the houses I'm working on. As you can see, the house of Friscus and that of Lotis show rectangular entry hall accessible only from the street through an elegant entrance. The closed door protected the intimacy of the family, but its high visibility made the entrance an excellent place to display the status of those who dwelt within. In terms of shape, they bore a close resemblance to the rectangular vestibula found in most African houses. The house of Friscus was entered through a wide gate and small lateral door. The large door was probably opened when the master gave an important reception, while the small lateral door was perhaps used by the household for everyday purposes. In the house of Lotis, two vestibula give access to distinct areas of the residence. In the house of Friscus, 2 rooms connect to the vestibulum, room 14 and room 15. I don't know if it's clear. Okay. Despite being adjacent, but their size as large rooms does not suggest that one served as cella janitoris compared with the other areas of different elements of the house. Room 15, according to Barades, consists of service space, kitchen, lavatrina, and porticus. However, it's difficult to identify these spaces on site. The only recognizable space is the lavatory, which has a basin placed in the corner of the room. The size of room 14 and 15 does not suggest that one of them could be used as porter lodge. In the house of Lotis, section 1, there are two rooms that open into the vestibule, room 2 and room 3. The room 2, with its entrance close to the main gate of the house, offers a clearer view of the main gate, but its large size complicates identifying it as cella janitoris. Despite that, the janitor is often mentioned in the ancient text, but it's not clear how this room was in size or location within the house. Let's see this text, in which Apuleius notes that the closed gate ensured the family intimacy, indicating that entering or leaving the house was a matter of the master's dignity and authority, and a servant was charged for monitoring who entered and left. The janitor was not allowed to open the door without the authorization of his master. Let's see another text, also in Metamorphoses as well. It's mentioned the delay. I don't know if it's clear, number 4 in the text here. A suspicious delay. Okay. I don't know. Maybe I will give you time, okay, to focus on these details. It's mentioned the delay. Does this mean that the lodge were an adjacent space to the main entrance, so that the janitor made a delay? Or that the janitor should stay awake even if the lodge was somehow distant from the entrance? Another point that I would like also to discuss is the central courtyard peristyle. As a distinctive example of the peristyle house type, the plan of the Romano-African house was dominated by the colonnaded court as the central part of the building and the largest unit in the entire layout of the house, around which the various parts were disposed. This Greek invention was soon copied throughout the Punic world, as it proved by the house with colonnade at Kirkwern, a city on a cape, that was destroyed and abandoned around the mid-3rd century. African elites were immediately drawn to style of a building that enhanced their prestige by bringing into their private houses architectural composition on a scale previously reserved for public monuments. The courtyard as open space, allowing air and light into the surrounding rooms, was a common feature in domestic architecture of the ancient Mediterranean. Tiber argues that the courtyards found Tiber argues that the courtyards found in North Africa are generally peristyle, and the traditional Italic house with atrium was unknown in North Africa. And he supports his opinion by quantitative data on the relative proportions of covered and open space, showing that the majority of African houses with colonnaded courtyards and the roofed central spaces should be classified as peristyle constructions. And with African texts as well, he supported his statement, in which the word atrium appears only once in the description of an eccentric structure in Metamorphoses. Let's see this in Tipasen. For my case, it's apparent that the houses are decorated with peristyle, except rare case in the eastern district at Temogadi in Algeria, and this has been confirmed by research. Generally, and also for my case, the peristyle also is decorated with semicircular basins, which opens onto vestibulum and the main reception areas, as you can see here. Also, the section 1 of the House of Lotus generally, the basin is decorated with mosaics depicting marine scene, as you can see here. Two examples, one of them from Utica, and the other one is from Ashula. Another point also, reception spaces in North Africa. Are they triclinia or oikos? As you can see, Vitruvius has provided us with principles of defining and determining the nature of dining rooms. Corinthian and tetrastyle oiki, and those termed Egyptian, and also the oiki Sizicini. But it's really difficult in North Africa to identify such spaces, especially when no mosaic, no architectural element, and we cannot depend just only on the dimension of the space, and also another detail, which is the entrance, because generally such main area is opened into the vestibulum by an entry, entrée tripartite. I'm sorry, I can't explain this in English. But through her study, Margherita Carocci could give some criteria to identify space. A triclinium is generally decorated with a mosaic, whether presenting U-shape and T-shape, as it's here. I don't know if it's clear in room 4, or just U-shape. And also, it's large area compared with the other elements of the house. But in some cases, scholars identified the large area as oikos. So, what can we do? facing this conflict of opinion, and especially when we don't have the material, I mean, to identify such space. Depending or using the Vitruvian principles are not enough. Another example of triclinium, but here in the house of the triumph of Neptune. As you can see, the room 35 is identified by Margherita Carucci as a main triclinium. In my case, the largest room is room 12. If I take into consideration the large area of its of this room, but this space is accessible only through two lateral entrances. According to Paradis, this space is nor triclinium nor Apuleius. It's solarium. But what can we say about this room? Tiber, a French scholar, I don't remember his name, he identified this space as triclinium, and the fact that it's the largest one, and also he suggests that the space between the two entrances was added later, and it was, in fact, provided with entrée tripartite. So we need here a real examination of this part to say if it's a triclinium or not. Another point is, generally, the Margherita Carucci, through her study, she came up with criteria to also identify such a room. One of them is that the peristyle is accessible through an entrance. As you can see here in the plan, John Paradis, according to him, I don't know if it's clear here on the plan, but on site, it's really difficult. The reason why, because this phenomenon of building the lower part of the colonnade, according to Hélène Dessal, it appeared in Italy and moved to North Africa during the 2nd and the 3rd century. And another point is the exedra. This is the room 12, as you can see, and that the French scholar, I can't remember his name now. And also the room number 9 in the section 1 is the largest room of the house of Lotis. What can we say about this characteristic and this arrangement also? It looks into the porticus of the peristyle, and also where a semicircular basin is in the front of that room. It's the same with the number 1 in the house of frescoes. This is according to Ribuffat, okay, this is the French scholar, Ribuffat, the room 1 in the house of frescoes is an exedra. whether the room number 12 is identified as Herculaneum. Section 2 of the House of Lotis, the largest room in this section is the room 2, provided with its entrée tripartite. And the peristyle in this section is not accessible only through an entrance which which is facing to this room. What can we say also about these details and this resemblance? Now, I will discuss also the cubiculum, the bedroom. In his treatise, Vitruvius gives principles regarding the bedrooms, and he noted that they have to be faced to the east to require more light, and also a passage in Apuleius mentions that the bedroom is an isolated space far from the other elements of the house for the privacy of the family. As you can read here, it's a passage in Metamorphoses, I think, revenge, as if she wished to speak to him privately. She led him away to his room and remained there behind closed doors with him for a length of time, as well as all the grain at hand had been milled and more was needed, the workers stood outside the door, first of all, and called to their masters for new supplies. Here I'm imagining the attitudes or the behavior of the servants or workers compared with the private parts of a house. When, I will also return to the text, when they had shouted several times, first of all, which means that there is, what time, okay, loudly without a reply, and pounded the door, finding it securely fastened and suspecting something gravely wrong, they broke the lock with a powerful heave and forced their way in. So here, Apuleius notes that the private, the bedroom are, I mean, during his time, isolated compared with the other parts of the room. Is it a fact or just a superstitious history? Here in Tipasa, room 9, 10, 11, as we can see, the room 11 communicates only with room 12. And it's an isolated, I mean, in its position within the house. This link between the two spaces, is it, what can we say about this link of, between the two spaces? If the room number 12 is identified as Herculaneum and the room number 11 is cubiculum. In North Africa, there are many examples when a cubiculum is adjacent or there is a link between the Herculaneum. But to put it isolated and also in the same time connected to the triclinium. There is here a conflict of point of view. Is it solarium? We don't have evidence. The room 10 couldn't be a triclinium. The reason why, because there is, how we say, it's provided with many entrances. So the movement in the room, I mean, the circulation, such an environment doesn't suggest that this room was identified as a triclinium. But what can we say about room 9, room 8? Taking into consideration the dimensions, as you can see, square. According to recent research, they could come up with some criteria of identifying the cubiculum, but only when the floor is, they could find that a cubiculum in North Africa is decorated generally with a mosaic. Now, I can't remember the scientific word now. In French, we say, in English, I can't. In French, we say la bipartition de pavement de mosaïque. It's divided in two patterns, geometric pattern and floral pattern. And also, their connection between and link between a triclinium, generally, not generally, but according to the research, they say that many cases in North Africa we find that the main triclinium is adjacent with two spaces identified as cubiculum. The reason why, because its spaces was decorated with pavement de mosaïque, bipartition, depicting two different patterns of the panel. Yeah. But another detail that I would like to share with you is here in section 1, in the house of Lotis, is the room number 7. This room is really isolated from the other part of the house, but I want to make a mistake of interpreting a space with a background based on ancient sources. But what can we say about this room? And as we can see, there is it's only accessible through the western porticus, and after passing the entrance, we turn left. This is the room, number 7, as you can see. Another case, rooms with approximately areas just adjusting each other and provided with a small entrance. We have, I didn't show you this house before. As you can see in the house in the Triumph of Neptune, where cubiculum are set to the right, in the right, in the left, compared with the main space, which is triclinium 35. And I don't know if it's clear, la bipartition of the pavement here. I don't know if it's clear for you also. Another point also is tabernae and workshops. The criteria that I would like to adopt for identifying such element of the house is that the connection, is it more to the inner part of the house or the outsider part of the house? When they are provided with an entrance, wow, what a chance, it's good. But we don't, in the other cases, what can we say about their function? As you can see here, Room 17 communicates only with the eastern porticus of the main street in the city, which is the Cardo Maximus. Also 16, 14, 19, 20, and another room which was modified in the third phase of the occupation of the house. Most of them preserved a dolium, and according to Baradas, he thinks that there is an economic activity in this space. And also, I was thinking about here of the role of the social status of the house owner. Friends of mine, she's an epigraphist. She worked in her PhD. She found an interesting testimony there, which notes that a Roman citizen requested from the government or the possibility of opening a shop into the main street. And we discussed this issue because according to her, it was not allowed for everyone of any social status to open a shop into the street. So what we can say about this? The same thing. Thank you for your patience. And,
Thanks, Zakarya. I think we have time for one or two questions, if you can.
okay, yeah.
Looks like Matt has a question.
Thank you for this performance.
Could you please just speak up to understand you and to listen to you well?
Hello. Okay. Thank you for this. This was such an interesting archaeological site that you're working with. I'm curious about the role of water in these houses, especially since you're right on the water. But thinking about the semicircular basins that you showed in the peristyle, it looks like those could have held water.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. The room number 1, it's a big cistern is arranged, and this cistern provided a fresh weather for the room, and also, as a pedestal, as you know, the rain falls into the roof and gathered in the
Impluvium.
yes, yes, in the fountain, because the semicircular part of the fountain is open. Okay, so it collects water, and the water will flows into a canal, so it will fill the cistern.
That's really interesting that they've adapted the impluvium. They've adapted the shape of the impluvium and added mosaics. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was really interesting. I have a question about the preparation for the steps for the second floorings in these domoses that you got. You saw maybe some traces on the walls and on maybe some of the layers about this kind of floorings, maybe in the area of the peristyle. Yeah. I'm asking this because I immediately thought about some places on Pompeii and Ostia. I immediately saw some links, so yes. I was wondering if there are some data more about this kind of point.
Okay, thank you for your question. In my magister thesis, I have discussed this point, and I focused on some evidences, the thickness of the wall and the technique used in its construction. And also, the evidences that you have mentioned are just apparent in the southern wall of the house of Lotis. And I don't have image now, but we will keep in touch, and we will discuss this issue. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Because I didn't find stairs. The only case is in the house of Achilles, and it's part of my PhD, and now my work is in progress, and I can say nothing now, but you will find it published in article in the future. Yeah.
We have a reception upstairs to which everyone is invited, so I hope that everyone will join us there for a glass of Prosecco, and we can ask more questions to Zakarya there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gelato?